Welcome everyone to the last work session of 2021 at the Port of Olympia, December 6, 2021. The Port of Olympia is working diligently to address the threat posed by COVID-19 to Thurston County, the state of Washington, and the United States. On March 16, 2020, the Commission adopted Resolution 2020-03, authorizing certain emergency powers in light of the COVID-19 outbreak, including invoking applicable emergency exemptions to meeting notice requirements and location restrictions of the Open Public Meetings Act. Pursuant to that resolution, the Port of Olympia Commission is conducting today's meeting remotely. The Port is following the guidance from the Thurston County Health Department to take all efforts to prevent the spread of this virus and is acting in the interest of the safety and welfare of the public, the community, and our employees to limit its spread. Commissioners, do I have a motion to approve today's agenda?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Commissioners. We have an agenda, and I would be remiss if I did not point out that the executive directors met in executive session at 1:30 p.m. today to discuss performance of an employee, and no decisions were taken, no action was taken. And we closed that meeting at 2:29 p.m. And so now we're here. So with that, the first order of business is the Port of Olympia Economic Benefit Study. Our own Lisa Parks presenting. Hi, Lisa.
Good afternoon, Commissioners and Shayla. I'm hoping that we have in the audience our consulting firm of Martin and Associates. The consulting firm was hired at the end of 2020 and has been working diligently on updating the economic benefit study for the Port of Olympia. And I am going to turn it over to Mr. John Martin and have him go ahead and give you the presentation.
Great. Hi, good to see you all. Wish we could be there in person. Well, I lost everybody. Wait a second. Hello?
We got you, Mr. Martin, and now we're looking at your PowerPoint.
Okay, good. That was weird. I all of a sudden it was my screen went blank and I was on my file. I'll tell you, it'll be really good when we could all get together again and have a good presentation, good meeting, visit Olympia as we've done over the years, helping you with your economic benefits analysis, and hope that'll come sooner than later. We were actually hoping to be there, not thinking that this would continue on as long as it has, but unfortunately we'll do this by Zoom. Can you, and also joining me is Michael Sarbaugh, who's the project manager. I don't know if you can get Lisa, can you get Mike on to join as a panelist? I'm just going to be the fellow that introduces what we've done and so forth and so on. Mike is going to walk through the results. We'll try to keep it short. It's very difficult to do long presentations over Zoom, but please, if you have any questions, we can go into detail. We're going to keep it at a higher level summary, but same presentation you all have received, but we're going to keep it short. And then if we want to get into detail, we certainly can do that. Okay. So with that, now I lost the presentation.
I will push start on the presentation when you
Okay,
are ready.
great.
Are you
Great.
ready, rock and roll?
Are you gonna, who's controlling it?
I am. I'm Shayla.
Okay, but I'll tell, where are you, Shayla?
I'm this little screen.
Oh, there you are.
Hi there.
Okay, hi, how are you? Okay, no, the point is, I'll tell you when to go to next slide. Is that okay?
Fantastic. I will listen
Okay.
to that
I
cue.
just didn't know if you're putting it on automatic, so.
Nope, I'll go ahead and start it now.
Okay, thank you very much. Anyway, I hope you all are doing well. It's good to see you all again.
Nice to see you, John.
All right. Perfect. Now I got to move you away so I can see the rest of the presentation there. Sorry. Great. We finished this, I think, in September. Had planned to actually give the presentation as you see back in October, but then I guess there's some personnel changes and things that went on and so forth. So it got delayed a bit. But anyway, we're happy to be doing it. So again, it's to measure the economic benefits of the Port of Olympia. I think this is our third or fourth analysis that we've done over the years for the port, looking at measuring the economic benefits. And if you go to the next slide, the first question everybody asks is, well, why do you want to do an economic impact study? And obviously, there's several very important reasons. One is from a community standpoint, is to demonstrate how important the port is, how important the investments the port has made in infrastructure, et cetera, have been over the years in terms of generating jobs, sustaining economic impact, and sustaining tax revenues and so forth and so on. So from the community also to show that you're a good neighbor. Second of all, from the legislative standpoint, oftentimes we use the benefits analysis to talk about securing funding from the states, state DOT, state economic development groups, et cetera. So it's very important to be able to demonstrate the importance of a specific project in terms of its economic creativity and economic justification. From the commissioner's standpoint, it's very important when the staff comes to you and talks about a project, you want to understand why do you want to invest or why do you undertake this project in terms of economic benefits. We usually then recommend that the port bring those economic benefits together with looking at the financial implications from the port's financial bottom line as well. So you can balance it not just from a pure job generator, et cetera, but also make sure it's financially viable and feasible from the port's perspective. And then from the port staff's perspective, I built the first economic impact model in 1979 for the Port of Baltimore, and we used it when we were actually starting to do strategic planning work for ports back in those days. And we wanted to get away from the use of these canned models and things to really be able to look at the impacts of specific projects. And therefore, that's why our analysis are always based on interviews and developing specific models for the different types of lines of business you're in, because we use that in strategic planning. So the port staff can say, okay, let's look at investment in this project. Let's look at investment in this project, whether it be a maritime use, whether it be a real estate use, or aviation use, so forth and so on, and use the models to help us rank the projects in terms of different types of potential economic impacts. We use it a lot for targeted marketing. Oftentimes when we're looking at specific types of industry to bring in for real estate development, what type of job impact it's going to have in terms of the value of the job, in terms of the dollar value that it will create, in terms of income, as well as number of jobs. Also on the maritime side, we often use this when we're targeting specific markets, new markets to get into, like what is the importance of that type of a market in terms of job generation. And then in land use decisions, whether you do a maritime project or a land use development project, what type of land use do you build on waterfront property, et cetera. So it's all important from a planning perspective, the reason we do the economic impact studies at the port staff level. So if you go to the next level, next slide. So what we do is we look at the impacts or the benefits by business unit, by sector. We look at it from the marine terminal sector, the marina and boat works sector, the regional airport, new market industrial campus sector, which is a combination of aviation activity as well as industrial real estate development. We look at it from, we model specifically for Peninsula Properties, and then new this time for the Lacey Commerce Business Center, which you purchased since our last impact study in 2015. We look at the benefits, and it's important. I always make this statement. I think at the first economic impact benefits analysis we did for the port, I think it was 2011, Mike, wasn't it, or 2008? It might have been 2008 or 2001. But there was always a question, okay, what's the benefit of the differences between the impact of maritime activity and the marine activity, where the port actually, without that channel, without the cranes, without the terminal itself, the activity wouldn't occur. And so in that respect, we talk about the port generating the jobs, the maritime activity generating the jobs. And on the real estate development, we always like to differentiate that a little bit, because it's the demand for the actual industrial activity that creates the jobs in this case, but it's because the port has made the investments in the infrastructure to ready the property to bring in industrial development, real estate utilizations, that we make that distinction. That's what supports the jobs, and then the demand for the products and the office spaces that generates the jobs. So next page. We build also, not only do we want to look at the baseline impacts, but we also look at the impacts in terms of sensitivity. That allows us to do those rankings of projects, et cetera, that I was talking about. So from the marine terminal model, we look at the impacts with respect to the cargo levels, the changes in cargo levels, the impact of a new carrier, the impact of a carrier going away, the impact of a market going away, the impact of a new market. We look at changes in labor productivity on the terminal itself. We look at the flows, how far the origin destination, the hinterlands are of the different commodities. That allows us to estimate truck impacts, et cetera. We look at it, allows us to look at specific investments in terminals that may be market driven and what that would generate in terms of job and economic value. And then we also use it for annual updates and for any type of other scenario analysis that the port asks us to look at during the time between we do the actual surveys and we do the next impact study. From the marine and the boatworks model, that allows us to look at the changes in the number of boats moored and the mix of boats moored, because the sailboats have a different impact than power boats because the expenditures are made for, I don't know how many of you have boats. I always use friends' boats, but I know it's very expensive and purchases for supplies, purchases for paint, purchases for equipment, for maintenance and repair, et cetera. We measure those impacts and lets us to look at the changes in those impacts. Also lets us look to see the impacts of additional transient operations where boats will come in, recreational boats will come in, people get off the vessels and spend money locally and then get off and then go back on their boats. And again, like I said, by expenditures by the boat owner. So next page. So for the real estate model, which is very important here for the Port of Olympia in terms of job creativity, we look at it in terms of new type of development, whether it's industrial, whether it's an office, whether it's restaurant, whether it's hotel, et cetera. So we can look at the very specific impacts of a new tenant or a change in a tenant or a tenant you might want to go after. We can then use the sensitivity model and the real estate model to compare with non-maritime and non-aviation uses of the land parcel. It allows us to develop marketing strategies from a real estate standpoint of who you want to attract and grow that business. It justifies port assistance in infrastructure development, the putting down the basics, the sewer, electricity, the water, road connectivity, et cetera. And then we also compare that with the financial performance, either from you leasing it or actually outright sales. So with that, let's go on to the next slide. And we talk about how we really measure the impacts. And when you look at the activity, those different lines of business, the cargo, the boat works, the real estate, general aviation, and so forth, capital projects, investment activity, it's very straightforward of how this works. Those activities generate a business revenue to the people that are involved in supporting those activities in those lines of business. That business revenue is then used to hire employees. It's also used for retained earnings, and it's also used for local purchases. It's really hard to give these over Zoom because I like to usually walk around and talk and point out how that works. So I'm trying, but so when you go to business revenue, you get the payroll. That hires the direct jobs. All right. Those direct jobs, then the direct job holders go out and spend money on the local economy. That's known as the multiplier effect. The respending effect of income, and they buy goods and services, groceries, healthcare, transportation services, housing, groceries at store or at food at grocery stores, food at restaurants, et cetera, which we model by looking at expenditure surveys done by the Bureau of Labor Statistics for that area of how people spend their money. That creates induced jobs, that's a pizza pie there. The induced jobs, which represents the food and different types of jobs that I talked about. And then on the local purchases by the companies, create the indirect jobs. That's because the companies are buying maintenance services, they're buying accounting services, professional services, they're buying office supplies. On the cargo side, they're buying equipment, et cetera. And they create what we call the indirect jobs. And then everybody ends up paying taxes. So those, go to the next slide. Go to the next slide. So in reality, we always talk about the economic benefits, not just the economic benefit. The benefits are measured in jobs, direct, induced, and indirect, in wages, direct, respending, indirect, business revenue, and in terms of taxes. Because you can have one type of an impact, maybe not too many jobs, which creates a large business revenue. In another case, you have a large amount of jobs generated. They might be low paying jobs. So we want to look at it in terms of all these different categories so we can use it to really get a good ranking and a good feel for the different types of benefits that are being generated by the ports. Next slide, I think I'm going to turn it over. Oh, no. So the methodology, how do we do these? We interviewed 144 different entities, tenants, and et cetera, from the Port of Olympia. And from those interviews, we developed the direct models. We developed the direct marina model, the Swantown Marina Boat Works model, the Olympia, the regional airport, industrial parks complex model for the peninsula properties, and Lacey Commerce Business Center. In essence, those direct models are really a census of the jobs, income, revenue, earnings, and taxes of the direct employers and of the number of employees, et cetera, that they hire. So it's almost a census. We do that at the individual level firm detail because, as you can see, when we compare changes, we can identify what changes occurred at what level, even at the firm level detail. The induced model, which is what I talked about, the respending effect, we look at the consumer expenditures in the Olympia, Seattle metropolitan statistical area. CES means the Consumer Expenditure Survey. We get a specific income multiplier for Olympia by the different lines of business published by the Bureau of Economic Analysis RIMS-2 data that allows us to solve for what we call the marginal propensity and average propensity to consume, which then we identify how much is being spent locally of a direct dollar that you earn, how much is being spent locally, and spread those purchases across those different consumption patterns in the Seattle, Olympia, Seattle region. And then we combine that with job relationships and estimates our induced jobs, rather than just put it in a canned model. We can work through, we will actually see the flows. And the indirect model, we from our surveys of those 144 entities, we actually get their local purchases that they're making for such things as office supplies, maintenance and repair, professional services, et cetera, and combine those with what we call the indirect coefficients that we developed from the RIMS-2 model for the specific region. And that allows us to look at the indirect impacts in terms of indirect jobs, income, and so forth and so on. And having said that, Mike, I think you take it next. Can you go to the next slide?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So Mike's going to talk about the results.
Okay, thank you. So
okay,
as this slide indicates, in 2020, the Port of Olympia supported over 5,000 total jobs, 2,609 of which were direct jobs. And during the survey interview process, we collect the residency of the direct job holders. And through the process, we found that 81% of the direct job holders are residents of Thurston County. In 2020, the port supported nearly $450 million of direct business revenue for the region, $417 million at the real estate, $20.8 million due to maritime operations, and nearly $10 million in the marina operations. The port in 2020 also supported $308.3 million in personal income, of which $132 million was direct wages and salaries. This results in a average salary of over $50,604 average salary for all tenants and at the Port of Olympia. In addition, the port supported over $76.3 million in federal, state, and local taxes, 28.6 million at the state and local level, 47.7 at the federal level. Next slide, please. Using census, state and local government finance, we're able to break out the state and local taxes by type. And as this slide shows, at the state level, the majority of the taxes are generated by sales tax, 13.3 million. And at the local level, the majority, 6 million, are generated due to property taxes, followed by sales tax, 4.3 million, for a total of 28.6 million in state and local taxes. Next slide. In addition to breaking out the jobs by type of job, real estate, maritime, marina, we break it out by location. And as the table indicates here, roughly 63% of the total jobs are generated by the Olympia Airport, including the Newmarket Industrial Campus. Business revenue at Olympia Airport and Industrial Campus is about 78% of the business revenue and 65% of the federal, state, and local taxes. This is followed by the Downtown Peninsula properties, Maritime, Swantown Marina, and Boatworks, followed by Lacey. Next slide. Changes since the 2015 study. And this is important because we're able to go back and look at firm by firm changes, as well as operational new tenants that have come, tenants that have gone since the previous study. On the maritime side, there was a slight decrease in log tonnage. However, I understand that 2021 is on track to be the best year, looking at over 150 million board feet in log exports. Since 2015, there was also a loss in general cargo, and this was the bagged proppants that were railed to North Dakota for oil extraction. And as we know, between 2015 and the duration of the study, the price per barrel had plummeted. Oil extraction was what dried up in North Dakota. Port staff has done a good job of attracting new export cargo, including rice shipments and livestock. So that's great to see the port diversifying their cargo operations. At Swantown Marina and Boatworks, occupancy rate has increased from 77% in 2014 to 83% in 2020. And the port in 2019 finished an upland boat storage, which increased the number of trailer boats stored on port property. At the Olympia Regional Airport, including Newmarket, there was a growth at a specific aviation company and a new office tenant. Washington State Department of Transportation Aviation Division was not included in 2015. And since 2015, the Thurston County Sheriff's Office added additional jobs. As we've all noticed, the growth in e-commerce has spurred additional jobs in warehousing and the distribution sector, as well as there were several new tenants that began operations since 2015 at the Olympia Airport and Newmarket Industrial Campus. Downtown, several new office tenants at the Marketplace and Market Center office buildings, as well as a new light industrial tenant. And the Port of Olympia added 2 jobs in the real estate division since 2015 study. And as mentioned earlier, since the 2015 study, the port had purchased the Lacey Commerce Business Center in 2017. So what does this mean? Next slide. Overall, the port has increased total jobs by 633, 209 direct jobs. Business revenue at the port, has supported by the port operations, has increased by $160 million. And state, federal, and local taxes increased by nearly $11 million since the 2015 study. And I think that is it.
Yeah. So we'll be happy to answer any questions, go to detail of anything. We have detailed slides, et cetera, if you want to get into it. But that's been good news. The port's added jobs and economic value and supported additional taxes. So it's a good news story for the port. And there's a detailed report, obviously, that you have.
Sorry, Commissioner Downing, you're muted. Sorry.
Thank you. I muted myself because I had a short side conversation, like, where's my phone? Anyway, but appreciate the review. It's so helpful to have you folks come back in from 2015 and give us this review so we can actually see the changes in each division. I'm pretty impressed. I have a couple of questions, but before I ask mine, Commissioner Zita or Commissioner McGregor, do you have any comments or questions for these gentlemen?
I assume we're going to be doing our round robin as usual. Is that right, Commissioner Downing?
That'd be fine. Commissioner Zita, that's right. Go ahead.
Okay, so Dr. Martin and Associates, thank you for presenting your study. I remember when you presented your study in 2015 to us. And Dr. Martin, I remember you saying at that time that we would learn even more if we had not just an economic benefit study, but a cost benefit study or an impact and benefit study. And tell us what we're missing by not getting that.
Well, I don't think you'll learn even more. Benefit cost studies, which we do a lot of, are when you're applying for federal grants or state grants, such as the Tiger grants, the infra grants, et cetera, is when you typically use benefit cost analysis. And that's not necessarily economic impact analysis. That has to do with, for example, when you do, and we do a lot of these grants, when you're doing like an infra grant, for example, the projects are evaluated in terms of many categories. They're environmental benefits. They are evaluated in terms of safety benefits, in terms of externalities, meaning truck and highway infrastructure degradation. You look at each project to see if the project is taking, from a maritime standpoint, they're the cleanest one on the maritime side, where you look at, for example, are you providing a better alternative by keeping trucks coming to your port rather than to some farther port away? So you're saving environmental, we call it vehicle miles traveled, which you translate into emissions, you translate into safety benefits and infrastructure degradation benefits and so forth and so on. So you look at that in terms of the benefits generated, and then you look at the costs of the investments that are required for those projects. And that's how DOT, Department of Transportation, MARAD, for example, evaluates the various infrastructure projects applying for the grants. So that's how you use benefit cost analysis. Typically for fund, just for grants in those things. And then you couple that to show that you're also, what we're now seeing, the importance of the economic impacts and the economic benefits studies, I like to call these economic impact studies, is the importance of creating family wage sustainable jobs. And in some cases, in many cases, the types of jobs generated and supported by ports are historically concentrated among, some cases, disadvantaged workers. And they also occur in sometimes in disadvantaged and displaced or disadvantaged communities. And that's another thing that people are starting to look at now when they're doing grant applications, et cetera. The diversity issues, the equity issues, and so forth and so on. And ports have been very important because, as Mike showed, sustainable wage of about 50,000 plus per job, which is very important. So that gives you a little snippet of benefit cost analysis.
So I'm trying to look at your analysis as one of a number of analyses or that we could be doing to make sure that the investments we're making are the best investments we can do with public resources.
Yes.
An important part of that is sort of the starting point for your calculations are direct jobs, right?
Yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm.
And so you have 5,000 and some direct jobs for the port, right?
No, I think that's total.
That's total. It was 2,609 direct jobs.
And we have 42 people on the port payroll. So there's, well, you have, oh, that's right, 2609 direct jobs, and we have 42 people on the port payroll. So a lot of those direct jobs, as you explain in section 3 of your full report, are not necessarily people who are employed by the port. They're
Exactly.
port tenants and so forth. So
Yes.
the city of Olympia, the city of Tumwater, Thurston County, the sheriff's office, they might count some of those same jobs as direct jobs in their own economic studies, right?
Yes, surely, surely. Mhm.
Right. Okay. So we've got multiple counting there. It's about a factor of 84, I think it is.
We don't, I mean, we don't multiple count them. We're talking about, these are your tenants. This is, this is highly isolated just in the Port of Olympia.
Right. So the direct jobs that are associated with the port may also be direct jobs for the city. Same people may be direct jobs for the county. And so we've actually got 42 who are employed by the Port of Olympia, not 2,600 something.
No,
So
I don't,
that's an important point for the members of the public to understand.
yeah, it's your it's the port activity. Always think about it like this. It's the port activity that generates the jobs. Okay. And so it just happens that they're employees of ABC Trucking Company, or they're employees of the sheriff's office, or they're employees of an office company, or they're employees of a hotel, so forth and so on. It's your activity, wrapping your activity together.
Right. And then on page, let's see, page 2 of your full report, you note that these are not necessarily net economic impacts, in the sense that if the port were to disappear, these jobs would be lost from the economy. That is, if the port disappeared, these jobs wouldn't be mostly lost. They would appear in other, the city or the sheriffs or the counties.
Well, not necessarily.
For marine terminal impacts, you say,
necessarily.
for example, these impacts could be lost to the region as the commercial marine activity was located to another port. So these aren't jobs that depend on the port, but they're associated with the port.
Yeah, that's the point I made at the beginning. They're supported by the port's activities.
Great. I have more questions, but I'll yield to the next commissioner for now.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner McGregor, do you have any comments?
Yes, thank you. Dr. Martin, nice to see you again.
Oh, good to see you. Just
I've been
call me
around.
John. I don't want to be, I'm not a medical doctor. Just call me John, please.
Well, you slice and dice these reports, so I figured you had to have some kind of background in cutting of things. So,
No.
okay. Well, anyway, I've been around long enough to know of the 09 report and the 14 report, and now this one, which is done on 20, which is actually a 6-year span. But a couple of things compared to the last time on 14. Mike mentioned a couple of things that were different. Was anything else different as far as the informational gathering, tenant contacts, anything from the 2014 report, or were they pretty much a mirror?
It's the same methodology,
Okay. Okay.
We always use the same methodology. Obviously, multipliers change over time. There's different number of employees that change, which is why we measured the changes that occur,
Sure.
But-
Okay.
and levels of activity change. But I wanted to make one statement first. I failed to do this at the beginning. I wanted to thank the port staff. They were incredibly useful in providing us the contacts we needed, any information on volumes, cargo volumes, et cetera, that we needed. So the port staff was very important in this. I always want to make that point clear to the commissioners, that the port staff was very involved in this.
As
Okay.
well as a contact list of your current tenants. And then we can go back and look at our old database and match that up with tenants that are still there, tenants that are new, and tenants that are no longer there. So that's where having that database in-house of Martin Associates really helps us track the direct jobs and growth of your tenants
Over the
and
years.
operations.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you. So 2020 was kind of the year of COVID. So, and I have to confess, I've been on vacation most of last week, came home Friday, picked up the packet and left on vacation again. So I haven't had time to read the packet, but I will take that time to review it and get to know it. What do you feel is the impact of COVID? Is it in that report? Is there any mention of it? So,
Yes, during the survey process, we collected data as how COVID impacted primarily jobs, revenue during the year. And if you look at the very end chapter, there is a comparison that shows the loss from COVID impacts. So we were able to capture both current as well as how COVID impacted the businesses located on port property.
okay, thank you. I'll be sure to read that.
And that's going to be important, Commissioner, if you actually, there are, I know we're doing a lot of work in Florida for the Florida ports, and this is primarily on the cruise side, but we were able to help them to secure some grant funding because of the major impact on cruise. Just
Okay.
so
Yeah,
you can use it.
Was an impact. Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you. So it's stamped as draft. Is this going to be considered the final then at this point
Well,
after the presentation or
I'll-
what?
Yes, and you know, I think Jerry was the project manager, Jerry
Severe?
Severe, and then we had, you know, I'm not sure, then I guess she went on leave or whatever and things. So so our point of contacts kind of changed after the beginning. We submitted this, I think, in early September, as we said we would, but then we incorporated the staff had responded. We incorporated the staff's comments, et cetera, so forth and so on. But we didn't want to mark it final since we really didn't have anybody that said it was final.
Okay.
But all
So it's still
leadership
fine. So
did
it's still
go
a draft.
through and add their comments and suggestions. I know Rudy was a big help discussing the airport operations at Olympia Regional Airport. So
Okay. So at some point in time, we'll be able to put this on our website for people to pull
Yeah,
out. And
if everybody's
read.
fine, we can take that draft, just, you know, take it off.
Sure.
Because I noticed that too. I said, well, we still have draft on here,
Yeah.
but it's because we had that change in personnel and so.
Okay. Well, I have one more question, and I looked in one of these, and I don't know if it was when I previewed this. It talked about you talked about average salary at about 54,000 and change, but I saw somewhere else where you hadn't included longshore labor as a line item. The line item was there, longshore, but it wasn't included because it wasn't available to you or at some point in time. So does that skew the?
No. We have longshore is included. Absolutely.
Okay, because I thought I saw, and I said, I haven't gone through this thing.
No. ILW is included. In fact, we actually, because we work for the Pacific Maritime Association, we have access to much more detailed data than anybody has, except because we have their payroll data.
Okay,
it's included in there. Yes.
okay, great, thanks. That was it. I'm done. Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you, Commissioner. Okay, my turn, so to speak. John and Mike, I guess the most surprising thing to me was when you look at job creation, direct, indirect, and induced, the Olympia Airport and surrounding properties is far and away like 60% of those jobs induced. That's pretty powerful, and that speaks to the importance to the community of that whole piece of land and that whole piece of business down there. So that's pretty cool. Do you have any additional comment on that? The importance of industrial land to a port?
It's clearly becoming one of the major growth sectors of ports that have the ability to do multifaceted, I don't want to say multimodal, but multifaceted operations, because from the port standpoint, it increases your diversity of revenue sources, number one. That's very important, especially in times of all these uncertainties. And second of all, the growth, what we're seeing, we're involved in all the congestion, et cetera, going on in San Pedro, Los Angeles, and Long Beach. We've been monitoring that since July, and that's actually since June, and had just published some more stuff, just as of October. The need for industrial space near port as well as near consumption areas is growing astronomically. If you look at the vacancy rates in Southern California, which is really what's attributed to a lot of the log jams, there's no space. You can't take the containers off the terminal because there's no space. The vacancy rates in California, in Southern California, Inland Empire, and in Los Angeles County, for example, are less than 2% vacancy rates, and there's no land. You can't create this land. So ports such as you to be able to even, we're just going to see the same type of thing happening in Seattle, Tacoma, the Northwest Seaport Alliance, becomes very important that you have industrial land available for development, that the port has put the infrastructure into, that you can then either lease to a developer or you can sell to a developer, which stimulates additional jobs. And that, I mean, the amount of work, put it this way, with the growth in e-commerce, our analysis shows that you need 2 to 3 times more employees per square foot, even with automation, mind you, even with automation, 2 or 3 people per square foot more on a e-commerce generated type warehouse than you do on a traditional pick and pull warehouse. So the more land that you can make available for industrial type development, and I'm not poo-pooing anything else, I'm just saying industrial development is critical, and warehouse and distribution center development is critical, especially in the location of high population, high consumption areas, which you have with respect to the Seattle market and so forth and so on.
Fascinating, fascinating. And my only other question is, any comments about how Port of Olympia stacks up in these this analysis, job analysis, payroll analysis, tax analysis compared to other ports in the Washington area, state of Washington?
Let me say this, it's different. I don't like to ever compare one port versus another port. You almost have to compare yourself to yourself, because each port is completely unique, which is why when I started this methodology, like I said, 1978, 79 for the Port of Baltimore, you can't use these standard REMI models and implant models and all this because they don't recognize the uniqueness of the ports. You have to, and the types of jobs that are generated, because you're completely different than, say, you're completely different than Seattle and Tacoma. You're completely different than Vancouver, for example, who we do work for. You're completely different than Portland, Oregon, who we do work for. Grays Harbor, everybody's different. So you can't really compare yourself to one port to another. But what you can do is you can say, you check all the boxes. You're generating and supporting very strong, high pay, relatively high pay jobs, first of all. Second of all, you've done well because you diversified the mission of the port into various sectors that allow you to ride downturns and changes in different sectors of the business, okay? So that's pretty much, and you've grown the business. You've grown your impact over time. Now, that's not talking about your financial. We don't do the financial piece of this. But when we do strategic plans for ports, we also then incorporate looking at the financial benefits, financial return to the port. Are you doing well with respect to revenue per acre? How does that compare? There you can compare it. I can look to see what Port A typically gets on an industrial lease property on a revenue per acre basis versus what you're getting, what a typical port gets on a revenue per ton basis of a commodity moving across the facility, so forth and so on. So I don't know what your revenue growth has been, or your net revenue growth, or your net income growth.
Okay. Thank you, John. I understand that, and I respect that point of view. I'm going to turn it back to Commissioner Zita and see if she has any other questions or comments. You're muted, Zita. Space bar.
Thank you. I may have to turn off my video again if my connection gets too weak in order to hear you all speaking.
Okay.
So apologies if I have to do that. Could we look at slide 12, please? Kayla, could we look at slide 12, economic benefits by line of business?
Got it. Oh, I'm looking at it by paper. Yeah, there you are.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. So thanks, Commissioner Downing, for pointing this out. The Olympia Airport is pretty small in the port's budget that we just passed, but it is the major player in economic benefits, according to the Martin analysis. The marina, maritime, and peninsula are expensive areas in our budget, and they also have the highest amounts of port debt, about $20 million each, whereas the airport has the lowest amount of port debt. So we're seeing a real striking difference here in performance, that is in the benefits we're getting based on what we're paying in these different areas. So my question, Dr. Martin, is there anything in your report that would help us evaluate our return on investment from the different lines of business? We could kind of extrapolate it from this slide, comparing it with our budget that we just passed.
That's a great. That's
To do good planning in the future, we'd like to be able to make good investments and evaluate our return on investment.
That's a great point. And if you remember when I started out saying, this is one tool to use that talks about the economic contribution. The other tool is exactly what you're talking about. When I talk about the financial return, in fact, we were just talking about that. There's differences. Well, this is not a fiscal impact. When we do strategic planning work, for example, when we do like a master development plan for a port, you look at exactly what you're talking about. What is the revenue generation? Is it a market-driven investment? What's the cost of that? And then what's the return to the port from a financial perspective? That's one metric then you use. KPI, if you want to call it, you want to get fancy with an MBA term, key performance indicator. But realistically, that's what that is. That's one metric. Another metric then is it creating jobs? Is it creating high-paying jobs? Is it creating sustainable jobs? Is it creating jobs held by disadvantaged demographic sectors of the community? Is it creating jobs held by residents of disadvantaged communities, for example? So that's another metric. The value of the job, the type of job, the financial return of the port, all of those. Then when you do a strategic overall plan, you look at all of those and make your decisions in how you value each of those key metrics, key performance indicators. So
I think you've done some of that on slide 4. If we could look at that, please.
Not really, because
Well, if we could look at that, we've
Sure.
we've got something we could compare. Oh, I'm sorry. It's where it has Swantown. I thought it was slide 4, but I guess it's not. Oh, this is it. Oh, that's it. Go back. That's correct. So on the marine terminal model, we've got the terminal investments and the impacts and the productivity. On the marina, however, we don't have an analysis of the investments and the impacts. And if we were to do that, that would be a step in the direction of getting an idea of the return on investment, for example, of the fuel dock, which at this point is adding up to about a $5 million debt. And it would be useful to know whether that was a good investment for the public or not.
So this is, you slightly misreading what slide 4 is. That's what the sensitivity models allow you to do. Okay, which gives you the framework to talk about what you're talking about. For example, if we could then isolate the fuel dock, all right, and let's say, can you identify if there is a relationship between additional boats that will be moored at your facility or that results in increased transient operations in order to stop the fuel? And then you stop the fuel, you get off the boat, you get off your boat, you buy some food and drinks and entertainment and so forth and so on. If you can, isolate that through that shows the economic impact. But at the same time, you have to look at it from your business revenue model that you would have, that would show, okay, so here we put in $5 million to the fuel dock. So what is our projected revenue stream back to the port? Did that $5 million make sense from a financial return to you? Is it a good
Projections
business?
And
Is it a good
projections can be
business?
very different from actual data.
Excuse me?
And projections can be quite different from actual data.
But you can look to see, for example, like next year, what are your sales levels of fuel from that dock? Okay. And the same thing the next year and the next year. And then you can start making some estimates of was it a good investment? Before you look, I always say before any investments are made, and we usually deal on the marine side, on the marine cargo side, a lot of times, those investments, there's two types of investments to be made. One is what we call a systems preservation investment. That's kind of an investment that you need to do just to keep the doors open, the lights on, and basically preserve the facility. So that's necessary just to keep the business. The other is a market-driven investment. And that's an investment after you do detailed market studies and feasibility studies. You look at the return that you would likely get from what you expect in terms of volume of sales, for example, fuel. And you use that. So that would be a market-driven investment. The worst kind of investment to make is make a spec investment, just build it in the hope that they come. And ports had historically done that from the marine cargo side, had made big investments, and then it's hard to get, because a lot of times we were done without market studies. They were done because, they wanted to build something, and so they built it and hoped that they would come. And that's not necessary. And there are a lot of ports got in trouble doing that.
We've gotten in trouble doing that. We got in trouble doing that with our crane. We got in trouble with that with the Lacey CBC. We did our market analysis after the purchase.
Well,
That
there you
didn't work
go.
out. So I really appreciate your advice that we should be doing market studies and feasibility
Feasibility studies
before
first.
we make any big investments. Great.
Yes,
Thank
ma'am.
you.
Yes, Commissioner. I agree 100%. That's the only way to do it. I've been around. I've been doing this since 1974. I'll tell you what, I've seen a lot of bad investments made on build it and you'll come.
Well, thank you, Commissioner Zeta. We're running out of time on this topic. We're in our second round robin. Commissioner McGregor, do you have any last thoughts here? And then I'll follow you.
Okay, I'm going to make it real quick. What I was referring to in my question about longshore labor was on, I think it was slide 37 in the original presentation. It shows the direct revenue by impact category, and it shows terminal at 3.1 million, ILW, and it says NA. That's what I was referring to.
Oh, yeah, because that's revenue. That's revenue. The revenue is generated by the terminal.
Okay, but when we hire longshoremen, we charge a cost plus. So there is revenue.
It goes into the bottom line for it
Okay.
shows up in the revenue, the terminal operator, or the revenue of the port.
Okay, I just wanted to clarify that.
No, that's exactly right. Because I was going to say, because the longshoremen pop up that income for you.
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. We're involved in the negotiations with that right now. That'll be contract is due July 2022. So we're working with the Pacific Maritime Association on developing those contract negotiations. So it's going to be very interesting summer. You think congestion's bad this summer, wait till next summer. That's all I have to say.
Jeez. Ay. Well, thank you, John and Mike, for this presentation. there's a lot of good data here, and it's really a, if you will, a report card on the, is this Port of Olympia moving in the right direction? And, I see 633 new jobs, direct, induced, indirect. I see 72 million additional personal income, quite a large increase. So the port is, and I see state and local taxes, about a 25% increase in collections of state and local taxes, which go right back to the community in which we live and the state in which we live in. So, I feel good about this report. It's important to do this. I look forward to the next report, and I hope that the three commissioners, all of us will study this report for the other insights that are in there. Thank
Yeah,
you.
anytime you have questions, please call us, anytime, we're always.
Thank you. Good to
Thank
see
And
you
you,
guys.
thank you,
Commissioners, and
and thank you
Port
for your
staff.
continuing support of us over the years. We appreciate it very, very much. And next time I want to be there in person because I really love Olympia. It's very beautiful out there. So
Great.
take
Thank
care.
you, guys.
Be
Thank you.
safe.
Thank you.
Be safe,
you.
everybody. Thank
You
you.
too.
Bye-bye.
Well, we could go on talk about that topic. That was an interesting topic. Next, we have the Capitol Lake Deschutes Estuary Decision Durability, and our own Lisa Parks is presenting today.
Thank you, commissioners. I am Lisa Parks. I'm your Capital Investment and Planning and Environmental Program Director, and I'm going to be walking you through this presentation today. Shayla, if you could go to the next slide, please. So just by way of background, the Department of Enterprise Services is evaluating alternatives for long-term management of the Capitol Lake Deschutes Estuary facilities and assets. The stated goals of the project, as outlined in the draft EIS, are to improve water quality, to manage sediment accumulation and future deposition, to improve ecological function, and to enhance community use of the resource. Department of Enterprise Services issued a draft environmental impact statement in July, requesting public comment on 3 different alternatives. There were actually 4 alternatives. One is called a no action alternative, but the primary evaluation for moving forward is on 3 different alternatives. One was termed the managed lake alternative, which is basically to retain and upgrade the dam at Fifth Avenue, maintain Capitol Lake and restore some active recreation use, manage some of the sediment through initial construction dredging and ongoing maintenance dredging, implement adaptive management plans to improve ecological functions and manage invasive species. The estuary alternative would actually remove the Fifth Avenue Dam and create a 500-foot wide opening, and would essentially reintroduce tidal hydrology and estuarine conditions, and would also include initial construction dredging and ongoing maintenance dredging. It would install boardwalks, a pedestrian bridge at Fifth Avenue, a dock, and a boat launch for community uses. There would be some stabilization of Deschutes Parkway, and then upgrading and protection of existing utilities and infrastructure, and also have adaptive management plans to improve ecological function and manage invasive species. The hybrid alternative is similar to the estuary alternative, but it would retain a smaller Capitol Lake reflecting pool that would be maintained by constructing a curved 2,600-foot long barrier wall that creates that lake. And then initially, Department of Enterprise Services was considering a saltwater lake, but based on some comments that they've received through the draft EIS process, they're also now looking at a freshwater lake component for that particular alternative. Next slide, please. So the Department of Enterprise Services has compiled all the comments that they received, and they continue to review and analyze those. The link on the slide will take you to the part of the website that actually has those compiled documents. They had, I believe it was 863 some comments, distinct and separate comment commenting entities with multiple comments themselves. So a lot of work and a lot of comment and a lot of very thoughtful input on the part of the community. So Department of Enterprise Services is continuing to work towards a final environmental impact statement in mid-2022, and that would include identifying a preferred alternative and a recommended approach for long-term funding and governance of that preferred alternative. In the meantime, Department of Enterprise Services has reconvened the working groups and the Community Sounding Board to assist with their evaluation and work towards that final EIS. The Port of Olympia participates in the executive work group. Commissioner Zita is the port's representative. I've been sitting on the technical work group since it began meeting again. And then the port also contributes to and participates in the funding and governance work group. And Executive Director Gibney is the port's representative on that group. Next slide, please. So the port did provide comments to Department of Enterprise Services during that draft EIS comment period. The topics that we covered in our letter, which is included in your packet, and were primarily oriented around navigation, dredging, federal permitting, and sediment management, as well as implementation of the various mitigation measures, and then also recreation access. In general, we were concerned about a refinement of some of the assumptions that were being made in the draft EIS, particularly related to dredging, permitting, and some of the cost estimates. And we specifically requested some additional investigations and analyses to bring greater clarity to the evaluation of the different alternatives. And as was requested in the directions that accompanied the draft EIS, there was no specific expression of a preferred alternative in the port's comment letter. Next slide, please. So regardless of the specific alternative, the port is most impacted by the issues and costs associated with dredging. So this slide attempts to summarize those issues and better explain and demonstrate the nature of the port's comment letter. The information on this slide is taken directly out of the draft environmental impact statement, specifically in Chapter 2 on project alternatives and construction approach, and from Chapter 7, the planning level costs, funding recommendations, and other considerations. It shows a comparison information for the 3 different action alternatives for the 2 different types of dredging that's being evaluated, the initial construction phased dredging, as well as then ongoing maintenance dredging for over the life of the project, which is currently a 30-year planning horizon. Next slide, please. So in the draft EIS, there were some identified criteria that are being used to evaluate these different alternatives and to help Department of Enterprise Services select a preferred alternative. These criteria were developed by the working groups prior to the draft EIS coming out. They were essentially ranked by those different groups and were presented as such in the draft EIS. And since that time, Department of Enterprise Services and their consultants team have applied a weighting to the different criteria. So that's what you see in terms of the percentages on the screen. And I have to provide you with a correction. The percentages for economic sustainability should be 13%, and then construction impacts are 4%. My apologies for that mistake on your slides. Essentially, that's the weighting that they have applied to evaluate the alternatives as they work their way to that final recommendation and selection of a preferred alternative. Next slide, please. So essentially, Department of Enterprise Services and their discipline leads, their consultants, are scoring each of the different alternatives against that evaluation criteria based on comments that were received and technical analyses, et cetera, except that they are also asking the working group members and the Community Sounding Board members to score both numerically and narratively, and I'll explain that here in a moment, each of the different alternatives for the decision durability criteria. So this request to score the decision durability criteria is the process by which the working group and community sounding board members are going to be providing input to Department of Enterprise Services on the preferred alternative selection. So the guidelines that Department of Enterprise Services has provided they are looking for a numeric indicator of the level of support for each of the alternatives. And we'll talk about that here on the next slide. They're also equally interested in narrative feedback on each alternative. Specifically, they're looking for information that would help them understand what about each alternative increases support for that alternative, as well as what about the different alternative decreases that support. So they've requested one response per entity, and they have requested that the response be provided to them by December 17th. Next slide, please, Shayla. So this is the numeric evaluation chart that's been provided by Department of Enterprise Services. Again, they're asking for input on all 4 alternatives. So we're hoping to be able to review each of the individual alternatives with the commission this afternoon, asking first for some input on this numeric rating for the alternative, and then asking for some narrative evaluation from you to address the narrative assessment, which is, again, what increases your support and what decreases your support for each of the different alternatives. And then we would hope to take that input from today and prepare a draft letter that outlines the numeric and narrative evaluation of all 4 alternatives, and then present that in a draft letter format to the commission for your consideration at the next regular meeting on Monday, the 13th. And that allows us then to meet the the Department of Enterprise Services deadline of December 17th. So Shayla, if you want to go to the next slide, please, and then I can stop here and answer any quick questions. And Commissioner Downing, if you have any other input, or if Sam has any other input in terms of the system of walking through this, this exercise. Commissioner Downing, you're on mute.
Okay, thank you. This sounds fine, Lisa. I don't 100% understand the whole concept behind this, but I will, of course, go along with it. I appreciate that the Port Commission, it'd be best, and it's been requested that the Port Commission have one response. So you have 3 commissioners. I mean, I guess I suggest that you simply take an average of each response. And then I'm going to ask you, I presume that you're going to consolidate the narrative in terms of what increases or decreases support of a given question. So for example, the managed lake alternative, what would the commissioners in general say that would give it a higher rating, assuming we don't all give it 10s, okay? And what would decrease support for a managed lake alternative? So those are my comments about the process. Anything else, Sam? Do you have anything, Sam?
No, I think, again, what we're going to do is listen today, really try to zero in on, can we get an indication of what the numerical support is, and then we'll consolidate the comments and put it in the draft response, which will come back for your action next week. So both Lisa and I will be listening carefully as to your comments. And I think the thing that we're needing the most is, with the commission speaking as a whole, with one voice, what is the actual numerical value for each item?
Thanks. And the only thing I would add is that I feel a little bit of pressure giving you all this information right this moment. Is it possible that you can give us till Wednesday at close of business to submit an email with any additional narrative? Would that be acceptable?
Yeah, I think additional narrative is fine. Do realize that, you know, we're going to, we'll be putting the packet out, and so we'll be revising that anyhow, because it's just impossible to turn it around till tomorrow.
Okay, fellow commissioners. So basically what I requested was the ability to send in additional narrative, which of course that would be taken as a whole from the three commissioners, and Lisa will put that together in terms of the narrative support. Okay, I've talked enough. Lisa, back to you.
I have a process comment.
Go ahead, Zita.
Could we please look at the preferred alternative evaluation criteria slide? I'm sorry, I didn't see any slide numbers. There we go. So that's it. You'll notice that the highest criterion that the group is using for ranking these three alternatives is the performance against project goals. That is the most important thing to consider. And so it is important that we remember what the project goals are. The original project goals agreed on by the port, the cities, the tribe, and the county and lot are these: to improve water quality, to improve ecological functions, to manage sediment, and to enhance community use of the resource. Those are the highest priority. Those have been the highest priority from the start, and they are still the highest priority. So when we are doing our rankings, we should keep these in mind.
Thank you, Zita, Commissioner Zita. Lisa, you have the floor.
Okay, so what we would like to do, there are 4 slides coming up here. Shayla, could you go to the next slide, please? There are 4 different slides coming up here, one for each slide. And what we'd like to do is perhaps a round robin with respect to first the numeric support. So for the managed lake alternative, for example, this first slide, if we could get an understanding of each of your perception of the numeric, how much you support that particular alternative. And I believe the intent here is not necessarily to give a number for each alternative compared to the other alternatives, but rather looking at this alternative in and of itself. What is your numeric support of that alternative? And then if we could just get a few comments from each of you initially about what increases your support for that alternative and what decreases your support. And then we can move on to the next slide once we get through that for the managed lake alternative, if that makes sense.
Great. Shall we? Okay, on this round, Commissioner Zita, then McGregor, then Downing.
So I will go by the project goals, since those are the highest criteria. Improving water quality and improving ecological functions. The managed lake alternative scores very low in the draft EIS. And enhancing community use of the resource, it also scores very low. Managing sediment, the managed lake alternative, any of the alternatives can do fine on managing sediment. The managed lake alternative can do fine on managing sediment. However, it is the most expensive. So I would rank this a 2 based on the primary project goals, which is our highest criteria.
And what would increase your support of this, Commissioner Zita?
If the managed lake alternative did a better job of improving water quality and ecological functions, other environmental disciplines, and environmental sustainability, that would increase my support.
Thank you, Commissioner Zeta. Commissioner McGregor, your thoughts?
Commissioner
You might be-
McGregor, you seem to be muted. Or unplugged, maybe?
Nope, there I am. I should be back now.
Okay,
Thank you. Can we go back to the slide just before this? I would think, and I'm just throwing this out here, that we can take the no action off the table and show it. Because I don't think no action is what we're coming to here. I think we have 3 alternatives, and no action is, I don't think, one of the alternatives that we should even consider. So that's my viewpoint. I'm planning on no action to give it a 0 if I could, but I'll give it a 1. And the reason I can't support it is we're living that now, and it's not getting better. So I hate to jump ahead, but if you want to go to the next one, I've got a lot of comments on each one of them, and they all apply to each one of them. So I don't know. What I'm seeing is when I looked at the alternatives comparison that was provided, and I don't know what slide that is. It's after your percentages of evaluation. It's right after that. You had an alternatives comparison. Did you
Next,
take that?
It's slide number 5, Shayla.
There we go. Thank you. Thanks. So when I look at this, and then I go back into the document under table 7 and I think table 11, I look, and I look at 350,000 cubic yards. That's going to come out as the managed lake, 525 out of the estuary and 500,000 out of the hybrid. And yet the managed lake, they're saying, has to be upland, at least partial, if not most, upland disposal. But yet on the other 2, they're going to be removing just as much or more and more. Some of it probably will be clean by the time they get down to that. They are going to have to go to upland disposal, because you got the same issues with the cubic yards that are sitting in the lake now under any one of these 3 alternatives. And yet when they compared the total project cost, they compared the managed lake as an upland only, and yet the estuary and hybrid have very expensive upland disposal ranges as well when you consider them. And they don't know at this point in time, they're not absolutely sure one is going to work over another or a combination of both. So I think there's a lot of unknown in this, how we're going to do all water and upland and the costs of all this stuff. But yet they're pushing us to a dollar amount that doesn't seem to be equatable across all 3 of those costs. And so we also have asked questions on the navigational channel. They've talked about the Corps of Engineers picking up 25% of the navigation. There's documentation in there on that. And the Corps of Engineers hasn't made any kind of a commitment. I read the letter, the response we got back from them, that their comments that they put in, and that DEIS makes assumptions on the frequency of maintenance which are not accurate. The Corps has been prohibited from conducting maintenance dredging subject to resolutions of the state cleanup. Just all those kind of things. So there's a lot of unknown in here, and you're asking us to say, well, this is the better alternative. And I don't feel comfortable doing that until I know about all of the information and all of the impacts that are being caused downstream, if I can use that, because what happens in the lake, in the estuary, or as a hybrid is going to impact downstream. And there's just not enough information being supplied. And we've said that in our letter. And so I will send you off that information in an email to Lisa. And but I am not comfortable picking one over another. I realize there are criteria and we need to look at those criterias, but some of those criterias are impacted by the very fact that there's not enough information being supplied. So I don't know how a decision durability is really following all of the science that's involved with this project. So that's my statement.
Thank you, Thank you, Commissioner McGregor. In the interest of time, I'd be willing to go through all four of these real quick, Lisa, and give you my thoughts and then ask my fellow commissioners, especially Commissioner Zeta, if she would like to comment on all three remainders. It seems like Commissioner McGregor made some overarching comments.
Sure.
So since you're just taking notes, the estuary, I would give it a 1. The hybrid, I would give it a 3. The managed lake, I would give it a 10. And no action, I give it a 3. So going back to the estuary,
Can I just check that I heard you correctly, Commissioner Downing? Did you say you rate the no action alternative more acceptable than the estuary alternative?
that's correct, Commissioner Zeta.
Okay, just making sure I heard that right.
That's right. Okay, so Lisa, on the estuary, what would have me increase my support of the estuary? If the DES did a better job of convincing us of community benefit of the estuary. The hybrid, I ranked a 3. What would get me more enthusiastic about a hybrid is something besides that sheet pile, I think it's called steel sheet pile, more of a natural berm. Also, fresh water would make that a better alternative. Also, looking again at swimming and boating opportunities, working that in, DES, as I recall, said that that's outside their purview. Somehow they can talk about kayaks, but not talk about swimming. So some of those are my comments on the hybrid. The managed lake, if I'd feel less supportive of the managed lake if they didn't do an adequate job of sediment disposal. And I'd feel less inclined towards that. Yeah, anyway, I don't want any further thoughts on the managed lake. Obviously, I'm a strong supporter of the managed lake. And the no action as a 3. Let me change that no action to a 2, because the hybrid, I gave that a 3. And I feel more strongly about the hybrid than I do the no action. So the no action should be a 2. And I can't think of a way that no action would improve, because the lake needs help, it needs work. So no action is no action. So that would be disappointing. I guess no action, I'll tell you what, the no action would be more favorable if they could at least solve the New Zealand mud snail problem. But then that's doing something. So, it's hard to improve on a no action if you say you're going to take no action. Okay. So in the interest of time, those are my summary comments. I will reserve the right to give this a little bit more thought and perhaps send in an email.
Thank you.
So back to you, Zita. Would you like to give the summary of your thoughts on all 4 categories?
Sure, I think that's a great idea, Commissioner Downing, in the interest of time. And now I don't remember what number I just gave Lisa before, but I agree with Commissioner McGregor. The no action alternative is not an alternative. It does not show any, it cannot meet the project goals. The lake, so the no action alternative, I would give a 1. I agree with Commissioner Downing on that, I think. Did you say no action is 1?
I actually said 2. We're pretty close.
okay.
I said 2.
Well, I would put no action at 1. It's not an option. I would put the lake at 2. The lake has the lowest potential for restoring ecological function, and ecological function is one of the primary criteria. It also has the worst impact on the Squaxin Island tribe, and it is unacceptable to the Squaxin Island tribe. So for that reason, I find it unacceptable. And the reason it is unacceptable to the Squaxin Island tribe is it has no, if it had any potential to contribute to restoration of salmon habitat, then that would increase my support for the lake. So the lake is a 2. The hybrid is a 3. The hybrid will be very expensive. That's been clear from the beginning. It can restore some habitat and ecological function. It can restore some significant recreational opportunity and water quality by removing the dam. It will be more acceptable if it is a saltwater lake. A freshwater lake would be unacceptable because we cannot afford to waste fresh water from our aquifers on that little lake in the hybrid when we're going to need it for drinking water. And finally, the estuary, I would rank a 10, fully support. It is the most cost-effective way to meet the project goals, improving water quality, ecological function, managing sediment, and enhancing community use of the resource. It is also clearly the one alternative that is acceptable to every other entity in the area, the cities, the county, lot, and the tribe. The port is the only holdout at this point.
Well, Commissioner Zita, I just have a clarifying question for you. You feel like a freshwater lake would be supplied from the aquifers as opposed to Deschutes River?
That's, I believe that's what's on the table, but wherever the fresh water comes from, fresh water from the Deschutes River is necessary to, we can't divert Deschutes River flow. We need the Deschutes River flow to restore ecological function in South Sound. The Deschutes River is carrying highly oxygenated water that South Sound desperately needs. South Sound is nearly dead ecologically. So it needs all the highly oxygenated water it can get from Deschutes. We really can't afford to be diverting that.
Okay, thank you. Okay, how about you, Commissioner McGregor? Didn't quite hear your numbers, but I heard your comments, some of your comments.
Well, I would go with no action at 1. That goes without saying, I think. As far as the others, I'll give them all mostly support or partial support of a 4, only because I think there are other informations that need to come out. And my concern is that buried in that document are things that contradict each other a little bit. And when you're comparing apples to apples, then you need to call out that dredging of 450 or whatever it was, I don't have the number in front of me now. Anyway, cubic yards out of the managed lake, you're going to have to take the same amount out of the other 2 as well, if not more. And there's going to be a certain amount of upland disposition of cubic yards, because no matter which one you're dipping into that soil, and it's got mud snails and it's got that purple loose strife, I think is the name of it, as the 2 things that are not healthy for that place. So I think that I'm just going to go a straight 4 for the other 3, because I'm not convinced otherwise at this point. So.
Well, thanks, Commissioner. I mean, I don't love that response from you, but you know, I don't, in all fairness, I don't love Commissioner Zita's response either, but you know, obviously in democracy, we all have, but I just caution you that putting 4s down as a protest vote, if you will, your protest might get overlooked or whatever. So just want to double check. You want to give all 3 categories a 4 except for no action on the no action as a number 1?
Yes, at this point, until I get more answers to the other questions I've raised, and I'll send an email to Lisa on that.
Thank you, commissioners. Lisa, do you have any follow-up questions, or how are we doing on this topic?
No, I think if we get things submitted by email by no later than Wednesday afternoon, that would be great. And we will try to do our best to compile and honor everybody's input. And I will say that in the technical working group meeting, at least, it was clearly stated by DES that they are interested both in the numeric as well as the narrative discussion. So all of the different points made will for sure try to incorporate those because they are valued by DES as much as the number. It's easy, I think, to look at numbers and try to have that be the definitive answer, but they made it clear that they were interested in both the numeric as well as the narrative evaluation. So thank you.
Thank you, commissioners, and thank you, Lisa, for that topic. The port continues to participate in this process and looks forward to the final report from DES. The final EIS report. Next, we have the Oriole Hotel Federal Aviation Administration discussion. Our own Rudy Rudolph presenting. Hi, Rudy.
Good afternoon, commissioners. For those watching at home who may not know me, I am Rudy. As Commissioner Downing has said, I'm currently the operations director for the port as well as the airport director. Next slide, please. So this is an overhead view of the airport property in Tumwater. The area in yellow is the aeronautical side of the airport. The area in red is the non-aeronautical side of the airport property. Many years ago, the FAA recognized that, especially at general aviation airports, there's a significant amount of infrastructure that was very difficult and challenging to maintain financially. And so they allowed for certain areas of airport property to be used for non-aeronautical purposes in order to generate revenue to support the airport. All of the properties that you see on this map highlighted are subject to the Federal Surplus Property Act. And I also want to point out the property in question is in the very northwest corner, upper left-hand corner of the red area, and it's right at the off-ramp of I-5, the northbound off-ramp, very close to the blue lettering there on Highway 101. Next slide, please. So on April the 30th, the Housing Authority of Thurston County requested that to the Port of Olympia in a letter to petition the FAA terminate the deed restrictions on residential use of airport property for the specific parcel we're discussing. They stated in their letter their intent was to convert the property to permanent housing for low-income seniors and neighbors with disabilities. Next slide, please. So subsequent to that, obviously the Port of Olympia submitted a request to the FAA, and then the FAA submitted a response in late June. And in their response, they cited the requirements of FAA Order 5290.6B, which covers the regulations, policies, procedures for release from federal obligations. And it also covers the FAA procedures for evaluating such requests. And you'll see in the cover memo, there are a number of supporting documents that we attached in the package for this afternoon. In item number 3, the FAA's response in the narrative area, before it got into the very specifics that we'll get into, it clearly stated that first and foremost, release will not be granted unless it's clearly shown that there's a benefit to civil aviation, and that disposal of the property must produce an equal or greater benefit to the airport than retention of the land. Next slide, please. So specifics in the FAA's response on what the sponsor must demonstrate in a request to them, why the disposal will not be in excess of the present foreseeable needs of the airport, why the property release will not adversely affect the development, improvement, operation, or maintenance of the airport where the land is located. And that we must describe how the conversion of the property asset into cash better serves the purpose for which the real property was initially conveyed. Next slide, please. They continued in their response that this objective requires that the airport to receive an amount equal to the current fair market value of the property as a consequence of the release, and that such amount is committed to airport purposes. The airport sponsor must describe how more value may be obtained from disposal of the specific parcel than the retention of the parcel for revenue production under leasing. And the sale and disposal of airport property for less than the fair market value would not be authorized. Next slide, please. They went on to say the value to be placed on the land for which the release has been requested shall be based on the present appraised value for its highest and best use of the land. And a whole separate section of the appraisal requirements are outlined on what must be done with that. Next slide, please. And they continued, said the description of any intangible benefits to the airport will realize that the airport will realize from the release, applying the intangible benefits as an offset against the fair market value of the property to be released. And they very specifically noted only benefits to the airport may be cited as justification for the release, whether tangible or intangible, and the non-aviation interest of the sponsor or the local community, such as making land available for economic development, does not constitute an airport benefit that can be considered in justifying a release and disposal. Next slide, please. So what port staff is proposing as next steps based on the past discussion from the Port Commission is that we will consult with our airport master plan consultant to develop a scope of work, which would develop the response to the FAA criteria and the costs associated with that. We'd also look at canvassing in the scope of work, canvassing other Washington ports or airports for similar proposals that may have been successful, to review the FAA's specific appraisal requirements, as I just previously mentioned. There's a separate section they noted under Part 163 of the regulations and NEPA requirements that would need to be evaluated. And then also to look for any unanticipated challenges with such a request. Next slide, please. Before I entertain questions, I do want to note that on Friday, the Port of Olympia received a call from the broker who's representing the hotels, and they were contacted us and informed that that there's a national chain who's interested in acquiring the hotels. We weren't told what level of contact they have had with the owner. And the other thing that I think is important to recognize that before we move forward, we should have a purchase and sale agreement in place from between the hotel owner and the Housing Authority of Thurston County that clearly outlines the due diligence period that we cover our requirement to complete the scope of work. And I would suggest that that period of time for due diligence should be at least 18 months for all of the work and the responses from the FAA. So with all that, I'd gladly answer your questions.
Thank you, Rudy, for that overview. I've got a couple of questions, but as is my custom, I'll turn it over to Commissioner McGregor or Zita if they would like to go first.
Well, I'll take a shot at it. First of all, most of the information that I have and I've read has to do with selling of the property. And I am not interested in surplusing property and selling it. That's where I kind of draw the line. However, one of the things I didn't read a lot about in there, in that communication, was the leasing of the property. And I think that we need to be very explicit in our question is how do we work around leasing the property because the use is could potentially change if there's a purchase sale agreement that could change from hotel transitory type of occupation of the building to more permanent I don't know if they lease, rent, whatever they do, but for housing is that, in this case, senior housing. I don't know what that entails, but I think the FAA should be approached about that to find out what does that mean? Because I know that the property was reassessed last year, down from 1.3 million to 840,000. I know that the hotel currently pays about 50,000 per year in lease plus some leasehold tax, and those are kind of rounded numbers. I left my information at home in my hurry to get onto vacation. So, but I think we really need to ask the question, because I'm not interested in selling the property. I don't think that's. I think that's a process I don't think we want to go through. But leasing it out or subleasing it, they buy the building and then we have a lease agreement with the Oyo Hotel already that's, as you've indicated, is up in 2046 or something like that. So there is time on that lease that if it could be done and could be subleased out, then maybe that's an option. But I think it's an involved process. I appreciate your frequently asked questions that you put out. I think it added a lot to hopefully to the discussion. But anyway, that's where I'm coming from. Not selling, but let's at least run it up the flagpole, explicitly asking about leasing.
Would you like me to answer that question now, Commissioner?
Sure, go ahead.
That question has been asked and answered. That was the very first question. And residential use is inconsistent with airport land, which is why the FAA came back and said, the only way that you can do this is to surplus the land, to sell it. And then they outlined the process for us to sell it in order to get it released, obviously, from obligations and then sell the property. They will not permit it to be leased for residential purposes. And you'll notice in the packet, there was also at the very end, I think item number 8 or 9, I put a summary of FAA's residential use policy in summary. So that was the very first question, which then the answer is no, took us down this other path.
So can I also mention that they also, in some of the documents I read, said it has to be outside the 65 DNL noise level, and that is well outside that noise level. But I can't help but think that we need to ask that specific question and get a specific answer. And I don't know that residential use of airport property is specific enough, if I can say that, but that's my discussion. So anyway, thanks, Rudy.
Sure.
Thank you, Commissioner. How about you, Commissioner Zita?
Well, Rudy, I want to thank you for bringing this to us and for providing all these materials for the commission and the public to look at. I see you included Representative Strickland's letter of support. If you provided Tumwater's letter of support or the letter of support from the Housing Action Team or from the County Commissioner and all the mayors, I'm sorry that I missed those. Were those in there?
No, those were not in the packet.
It would be useful to include those the next time we discuss this, because we have significant community support from many entities in the community. And I fully support us moving forward on, I'm trying to remember the word you said. Not leasing, not selling, but
Release from federal obligations.
right, doing that with this property. And I, given the high level of community support we have, I expect that we should be able to put together the resources to do this quicker than 18 months. It's kind of sat on the back burner for most of this year, and I'm really glad that we're moving forward on it now. Using our community partners, we should be able to get this in place well in advance of next winter. It's too bad that this place is not available for vulnerable seniors this winter, but it would be great if it was next winter. So let's make 6 months a target and stretch it to a year at the very most. I don't think we need 18 months. I know you can do it.
Well, Commissioner, and the timeline that I suggested to you, it has nothing to do really with the port side of it. It has to do with the federal side. And that's where generally the time takes the amount of time that I suggest.
Well, the FAA got back to your original inquiry in less than a month, and then the port's been sitting on it for the rest of this year. So the port has been the logjam. So I know you have good relationships with FAA, and we have help, we have community support at all levels of government at this point. So I think we could get this done.
Well, thank you, Commissioner McGregor and Zita. I as well think we need to get this done, Rudy. You know, we've got a lot of public pressure in the past on different issues, but not on issues where the port was basically in agreement with the public. So in other words, this seems like a great idea. I mean, in these days when Thurston County and the nation are facing housing crisis, to take a underutilized hotel space and turn it into housing units seems like a great idea. To reiterate what Commissioner Zita had said, we got a letter from all three mayors plus County Commissioner Ty Menser, all together in one letter. They all signed it, and that's available to the public through public record. We also got a letter from the Homes First organization urging us to support this change. We also got innumerable emails from the public. We also got 2 front page stories on the Olympian regarding the hotel. So I would say that, you know, there's considerable public interest in this happening. So I would appreciate it, and this commission would appreciate it, if we put utmost urgency behind this project. And the one thing you didn't mention was bringing on some sort of consultant to help us with this. I think you mentioned it somewhere along the line, and so I was hoping to see a number. You know, is the port going to contribute 20, 30, or 40,000 towards this effort just to get the request into the FAA? I also understand what Commissioner McGregor said about hanging on to the land. It's important the port, you know, hang on to its land, but if it can't be done that way, then we're looking at 2 or 3 acres that we would request that we surplus this through the FAA. So I'm 100% in support of moving this forward, and I especially like that you want to research, let's see, canvas of the Washington ports and see how they did it and what their success level was. There's a lot to it, obviously. 18 months does sound like a long time, and if you could get it done sooner, that'd be great. And finally, you know, I realized we walk a fine legal line because the owner of the property might be considering selling it to a national chain or what have you. But and I appreciate that if she's really earnest about selling it to the Craig Chance's outfit, that there's a purchase and sale agreement in place of some sort with contingencies pending approval from the FAA, pending release from the Port of Olympia, et cetera. And I think those needs to happen. But if next month a national chain says, okay, we'll give you whatever, $2 million for this property, and she accepts it, well, then we're end of discussion. So, but until that happens, I'd like to see us, you know, put major effort into this, because it's just a win-win for the community, and you might say a small sacrifice for the port.
I would caution us against any speculation about possible sales to other entities, because the last time that happened here at this commission, the hotel owner confirmed that those speculations were unfounded. So let's not do that, okay?
So what are next steps, either Rudy or Sam? What are next steps based on what you're hearing today from the commissioners?
I'll defer to the executive director.
I believe that the next step is we will come back to the commission once the airport planning consultant develops the scope of work and cost estimate to accomplish the work. And at that point, we'll seek direction from the commission as to how to proceed at that point. So then that will likely be in January that we'll come back with that estimate.
Are you inferring that a airport consultant has been located, Sam?
Rudy, you want to take that question?
Yeah, I've already had some preliminary discussions with our airport master plan consultant, and it appears that we have enough ability in our existing contract to do a task order associated with the scope of work. We're going to verify that with our contract person to make sure that we're got our T's crossed and on I's dotted on that.
So I have a question, if I could, Commissioner Downey. So would this be under your delegation of authority then? Sam, do you think that, I think that's what, 25,000? Is what your delegation of authority is?
Yes, to develop the scope of work and the cost estimate. Until we have that cost estimate, I won't know whether or not. And certainly I want to bring it back to the commission for their at least informal approval, if not actual approval. So it'll be,
Okay.
yeah.
Thank you.
So it would be good to have this on the agenda with the other letters of support this year, since those documents are missing in this packet. If we could please do that. Commissioner Downing, how would we proceed to do that?
Commissioner Zita, I think your request to see those documents and letters of support in the packet, that's perfectly fine. I'm not going to tie the hands of staff and say that a certain thing has to be done by next Monday, but I think we made it clear that this is an urgent matter, so.
And I just want to be clear as to what direction that we're getting. So we can upload those letters of support to the website. We have a portion that is indicated there for the OYO Hotel. So we can upload those letters, and we can do that this week. As to the inclusion in the packet, I mean, if you know, I'm not sure what the direction is there.
Well, I think
It's
that
great if
commissioners, go ahead, Commissioner Zita.
That's great if those supporting documents are made public on the website, and would be, I'd be grateful if you would share the link to that particular location with the commission, since sometimes it's a little hard to find things. So thank you.
Great. Okay. Everybody good? Okay. Thank you, Rudy, for that summary, and Sam for your comments as well. Thank you. Next we have, our last item is upcoming topics and agenda items. Sam, you have the floor.
Great, thank you. Or you can go to the next slide. As you know, we have one more meeting this year in 2021, and that is next Monday, December 13th. We do have a ground lease that'll be on the consent agenda. The lot memorandum of understanding is that is up for approval. I will note that they are meeting later this week, and so we'll put out the packet tomorrow, but we'll be revising it if there's any changes to that memorandum of understanding. The lot board is meeting, so expect a revision in the packet for that. The POCAC rules of operation, we'll be bringing that back to the commission for approval. The lease option amendment for Panattoni will be coming. We had an advisory on that. And then the follow-up for the discussion that the commission just had for the Deschutes, Capital Lake Deschutes Estuary decision durability. that will be coming back to you for that should probably be an action other, because that'll be the first time you see it, but we'll need direction from the commission in order to meet DES's deadline for that. Next slide. I do want to note that we have the rest of this year's meetings are canceled. That is the typical custom of the port is, and so the work session and the final meeting of the year, both December 20th and 27th are canceled. January 3rd is would be a work session according to our rules resolution. However, the new commission will not yet be seated, and so that will be canceled. We will be hosting a commission retreat January 5th through the 7th. And then the first full commission meeting of the year of 2022 will be held on January 10th. And with that, I think that's it.
Thank you, Sam, and thank you, commissioners and staff, for your participation today. We're at the end of our agenda. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
I have a question.
Go for it, Commissioner.
Agenda for next week's meeting. Can we look at that again, please? As this is the first time I've seen it.
1 second, I just closed it out. Hold on.
Sorry, thank you. Great. So lease option amendment.
Mhm.
Whoops. Lease option amendment, that's for Panattoni, I presume.
Correct.
Will this commission be discussing the draft development agreement? Tumwater had proposed some improvements, and this commission has not had an opportunity to discuss them.
No, we're not, that is not planned under this. This is strictly for the lease option amendment agreement.
So commissioners, I think we owe it to Tumwater to discuss the development agreement revisions that they proposed. Our Commissioners Downing and McGregor, would you do Tumwater that civility?
Well, I can speak to that a little bit. Commissioner Zita, over the past year and a half, we've deferred to our executive director and real estate staff to formulate an interlocal agreement and do the legwork, talking with John Doan, talking with presenting to Tumwater City Council. So there's been quite a bit of work done on the interlocal agreement. We were not successful in getting a mutual agreement on that interlocal agreement through the end of 2021. The year's basically over. There's no opportunity for us to meet and present any kind of interlocal agreement, take a vote on it. Matter of fact, we did vote on it. And the version from Mayor Komet is something different. So the executive director is totally within her rights to say, we're out of time. Please don't pursue this any further. So I think that if the city of Tumwater or the Tumwater City Council is watching this work session, in addition to, reading their emails, they will know that, an agreement unfortunately was not reached by the end of 2021. That doesn't mean we're not going to keep trying. I don't see I think that it would be inappropriate for us as a commission to discuss the details of individual lines within an interlocal agreement, because we've asked port staff and Tumwater staff to come together on that, and that has not happened yet.
Well, we have discussed those details in past meetings, and we have the opportunity to come closer to an agreement with Tumwater, and Tumwater has been a good partner with us in this process. And I think we owe the city of Tumwater and Tumwater's mayor the respect of, as a commission, engaging with their latest proposal and considering it. Commissioner
Thanks.
McGregor?
Well, I would feel that more, or more better is not the right term, but I would feel more comfortable if the mayor's proposal had been brought forward earlier in the process instead of at the Friday before the meeting. I think it came out on, maybe it was the Wednesday before Turkey Day. I don't remember exactly, but it would have been nice to have that. That discussion's been going on a long time, and to throw it out there at the last minute, I just don't know that I'm prepared to speak to it. So.
Well, if we put it on the agenda, we would have the opportunity to take a look at it and speak to it 2 weeks later.
Okay, if there's nothing else, I'd like to adjourn this meeting. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
That sounds like a no.
Yeah,
So moved.
Commissioners, I'm not planning on bringing it forward, so I just give you that. I'm not planning on bringing that agenda item forward. You may, of course, if you'd like, at the beginning of a meeting. So it's been moved to adjourn the meeting. Is there a second? I second. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Okay, we are adjourned. Thank you very much, everybody. Have a good week.